There are some companies that maybe believe in creativity through chaos. We believe in creativity through discipline.
Welcome to Culture and Capital, a SoFi podcast and a Cashmere production. We're giving everyday investors insight into how innovators build brands, influence culture, and maybe even generate some capital, helping you align your money with your values. I'm your host, Katy Perry. A few quick reminders, and then we'll get right into it. The information in this show isn't financial or legal advice, a recommendation, or an endorsement. The opinions expressed in this content are those of the show's guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect opinions held by SoFi and or its affiliates. SoFi does not endorse or guarantee any third-party product and does not recommend any brands or companies discussed. Cashmere's funds are available via SoFi Securities LLC, member FINRA. SoFi receives compensation from the sale of these funds. I'm your host, Katy Perry. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by two extraordinary guests who have redefined what it means to build and back brands that matter. Welcome to Jenna Lyons and Jonny Bauer. It's great to have you both here today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'll do quick intros for you guys, but we're going to get into your backstories. Jenna, creative force, best known for transforming J.Crew into a cultural powerhouse. Latest chapter is arguably the boldest yet, now executive creative director at FundamentalCo, where you work with Jonny Bauer, a globally respected brand strategist and executive. Jonny spent over a decade at Droga 5. If you're in advertising circles, you know this is a legendary ad agency. He then helped bring brand thinking to Blackstone's investment playbook, and now is the co-founder of FundamentalCo. Let's get right into it. Jenna and Jonny, you both had fascinating career arcs from fashion, creative direction, brand strategy, private equity. I'll start with you, Jonny. What drew you to the world of brand-focused investing, and why now? How did you land at FundamentalCo, and what is sort of the mission you're building towards there?
So the opportunity to kind of bring brand and the investment world closer together is that I think that we spotted an opportunity that brand wasn't really being leveraged within the context of PE-backed investments to its fullest extent. The definition of a brand is always, can be referred to as something like it's a logo or it's an identity. And I think that we saw the opportunity for brand to be so much more within that context, to really think of brand as an organizing idea that is useful to everyone within the company, and that can be connected and extended to every part of the experience, create alignment, synergy, and help prioritize and sequence investments to align what a company could become next. So in certain categories in these PE-backed contexts, not normally consumer context, that prior limited definition of what a brand is seemed to be pretty prevalent.
Yeah, Jenna, I'm curious to hear from you. You were president, executive creative director of J.Crew's three brands, Madewell, Factory, and J.Crew. So really building up established brands. Obviously, PE is really about reimagining, reviving brands. What brought you to FundamentalCo in this opportunity, next evolution of your career?
I started consulting with Jonny when he was at Blackstone. And so I got a little inside view into what this type of strategy work was like. And I realized how closely aligned it was to the previous work I had done. J.Crew had these three brands. One of the things that I was tasked with is sort of reimagining Madewell. Madewell had gone off into a different direction. And it became really clear to me how important everyone being aligned on what the organizing principles were. You know, it is so easy for everyone to make slight variations on decisions, and then all of a sudden you're going off in a different tangent. And so having everyone feel completely aligned as to what the vision is, what the purpose is, what you're trying to do, what your mission is so incredibly important. And it's also, I think, really important when you're talking about consumer-facing brands, which is what I have a tendency to focus on, because you're trying to telegraph something. You're trying to send a message. If there isn't alignment and clarity within the company, it can be incredibly complicated. The message can get muddled.
Yeah, I think you touched on something important that Jonny also referenced. And for people who are listening who aren't really in the brand advertising world, you do hear that word brand and you think logo, color palette, but where you're describing, Jenna, is much deeper than that and really can drive the ethos of an entire company. And is that part of the reason you think brand is so crucial as you're thinking about the health of a business overall?
I think one important factor to note is that oftentimes people will look at how to telegraph brand as a marketing campaign. How do I market this thing? But the fact of the matter is, if the concept way upstream, like getting the idea upstream, isn't held together well and doesn't have a coherent point of view, no marketer can market and something that isn't consistent and doesn't have a real clear point of view. And so I think our mission is always trying to bring it up the funnel, upstream, so that the people who are actually making the decisions from the top down and from the beginning of the process to the end are really focused on a unified vision. And that is a real game changer.
And Jonny, has your view of what brand has evolved from creative agency at Droga to Blackstone to what you're building at Fundamental? Has that evolved over time, or has your perspective changed at all?
Yeah, it's really evolved. During my time at Droga, which was highly productive and memorable, 13 years, we did come up with a lot of transformational ideas, but we landed up predominantly just transforming the advertising. And so to connect to what Jenna was just saying, that a brand idea should be something that is so much bigger and more useful to just the advertising department, but should also define who we need to hire, what product we need to make, how we're organized, what capabilities we need internally. And then that then cascades into marketing eventually, but does a lot of the integration and alignment that Jenna was just speaking to before that. I think that one of the other things that, being connecting the brand into this private equity based context is that we always think of value of a company being created by a company becoming bigger. So it'll become more valuable if there's just more of the same. And so we look at not just the brand and business strategy, but also investment strategy to think through like what category could this company be placed in at the end of this investment cycle. The combination of redefining brand as something that's more useful to more parts of the company, but then also using it as an agent to transform a company into something of higher value.
Yeah, you touched on brand as an investment asset, and a lot of themes on this show that we explore are in the private markets. If you're investing in publicly traded companies, a lot of our viewers know, okay, I'm going to look at the balance sheet, I'm going to listen to the earnings call. It's a little bit different for VC and PE. So I'm wondering for you all, when you're looking at a potential partner to work with or investment opportunity, and you're really looking for signals that there is a strong brand there or the promise of a strong brand, what are some of the signals you would pick up or maybe advise people to look for when looking for strength of brand? I'll start with you, Jenna.
I had an interesting career path where J.Crew was private, and then we were public, and then we were taken private. So I had quite a myriad of viewpoints of how companies are run. And what I saw that was incredibly consistent, and I think it doesn't matter whether it's a public company or a company run by private equity, if the mission is unclear, and I know this sounds like I'm repeating myself, it just gets lost. I think when you think about the visionary at the top, who's running the company, is there clarity at the top? And does that clarity trickle down? Do you believe, is there passion with that? Is it their core competency too? I think having people who are really passionate about what they do in terms of sitting at the top of the company and are like just relentless in that pursuit of protection. And when I say protection, I mean protecting the brand is deeply important. And it's something that we talk so much about, even when we're doing strategy work. Is this work laddering up to the idea and constantly reimagining and re-envisioning and saying, like, are we really staying true to what we're doing? Because are we going to actually is the customer going to know what we're trying to say? And so I think customer focused, customer centric is absolutely important if you are a D2C brand or even a B2B brand. A passionate leader, someone who understands the market they're in, and also just a really clear, concise understanding that most people in the company can tell you exactly what their mission is.
Yeah, I feel like some people on the outside might think brand is a vibe, but what you're laying out is it's really consistency and logic and bringing people along on that journey. Jonny, I'm curious, you think about looking at consistency and kind of crystallizing a mission and a through line across all of the marketing. Do you think that's harder for bigger companies to do sometimes, or even legacy companies that are almost trying to organize a mess that's been created over time versus a newer company that's starting anew?
I think that as companies get bigger and they take on different capabilities or geographies or technologies, it can then lose sight of what that bigger picture or vision is. So if you are an underwear company and then you start making clothing, like what kind of company are you? Who are you for? What's your role? Because you may be playing one role in one category. Can you still play that same role in another as you expand it? And it starts to be a little bit, less clear as to like the why you're there, right? And so we do think about those kinds of things a lot and try and take a step back. One of my early bosses once said to me, you've got to interrogate a brand until it confesses, right? So as you're thinking around what you could expand to, if it's not anchored in a real truth that is ownable and defendable and one that you can build on, that one where you really like have permission, then that's where you run into squinting or incredibility, right? So we just try and, always anchor wherever we think the brand can go to next into something that's true and ownable and defendable before we expand.
Yeah, to shed some light on this further, love to share an example. It could be a brand you worked on at FundamentalCo in your past lives that really you think represents this logic, consistency, purpose. And is there a brand that comes to mind, either that you've worked on or that you've experienced, that you say that is a great brand?
We have worked with two brands where they were first in category, meaning they defined the category. The category really didn't exist before they were in the market, and they built a huge brand off of that. And over time, there had been other people who had come in and followed their path. And, one of the dangers of being first in category and being really successful is you get afraid to move on because you've created so much success with this past product. And I think, as Jonny mentioned, so what do you have the right to do when you've built your brand on X? How do you then think about expanding, and what does that expansion look like? And how do you do that in a way that your customers really feel connected to, that they believe in, and that you can bring them along for the ride? I think it's also something that we see happens with a legacy brand like that, where there's an exit of the senior leadership. And all of a sudden, that's one thing that I think is going to be a challenge is when you had a visionary who started the company and then they're no longer there, how you reorganize everyone in the company to get back on the same page can be challenging because everyone has a slightly different version of what they want it to be.
I think that it may be stating a little bit of the obvious, but Porsche is a great example, right? So this is a company, they make sports cars.
We
Right.
both own one.
Hey. Well, we don't reveal those secrets. So, but think about Porsche. They make sports cars, and they started with a 911. Now they use that sense of brand as a filter to inform how they would make an SUV, how they would make an electric vehicle, how it's always, and they have very, very, very strict standards of what needs to appear in this category for it to be allowed to be called a Porsche. It still needs to be the sports car version of an SUV or a sedan or an electric vehicle. And that core sense of how it's different against all of its competitors is pulled through even though the product offerings are radically different, you can still tell, even with product and service that look really, really different, that it's all from the same DNA. And they could have cut a lot of corners. It's a lot more expensive and it takes a lot more engineers, but that's why, they never make one more car than they can sell each year, is because, and why they never go on sale and why they can charge that premium is because that DNA is really pulled through, even though the composition of the company's business has radically changed. Like, who would have ever thought that that Porsche would sell more SUVs than they sell sports cars and still have such a high degree of pull and love for just the regular sports cars.
Great segue into what you all do at FundamentalCo, because I think you brought up something important, which is a brand is extending into other arenas. It's not always a literal jump. And I think that is the role of a creative director, to make that translation and say, okay, in this particular space, we come to life in this way. And you guys at FundamentalCo focus on building what you call forever brands. Jenna, what makes a brand feel timeless to you?
And I think one of the things that I would say is incredibly important is there's a real difference when someone creates something that feels superfluous and feels transitory. I think that when you're actually solving a problem, that is something that I think is customer focused. So I think when you're customer focused, that feels timeless. What I mean by that is your customer needs are really where this all starts. You're selling something, you're actually providing either a service or a product. And so how that actually lands in the world, I think, is incredibly important. I also think what makes something timeless, and, as Jonny just mentioned, Porsche, you can also use like Ralph Lauren or IKEA. It's like, there is not this need for change. You can close your eyes and you can imagine what it looks like. You can imagine how it feels. You can imagine the sound it makes or what it might look like in your room. With that, there is a consistency there. And I think there is this need for a lot of brands to feel like sometimes they have to be current. And I think keeping the customer at the core, remembering that people don't necessarily want change. They want you to recognize them. They want you to pay attention to them. They want you to service them, but they don't necessarily need to change the entire world every day. And I think it's hard to make that decision to say, like, what are we really known for? What are we good at? How do we expand on that in a way that feels healthy and consistent and strong and not far-reaching and unimportant. And I think it's something I've seen over and over again. And also I'm guilty of. I can say when I was at J.Crew, there were times where we skewed to a place where I think we got away from what we were at our core, and that wasn't necessarily healthy for our customer. And so I think again, it's being really consistent is important.
Matt Higgins, who's a guest investor on Shark Tank, he was talking about, I was asking him, he meets with founders all the time. And I said, what's a red flag or beige flag? And he's like, I don't want to work with people who just find this random problem in the market and their whole passion is around, okay, I'm going to hit this TAM for this random thing that I have no connection to. And basically getting at authenticity. So I'm curious, authenticity, it's one of those fluffy terms you hear in marketing, but I think when you see it, you know it. And when it's not authentic, you also know it. What do you think of the role of authenticity, building on what Jenna was saying and having that genuine connection with your customers? Why is that so important?
Yeah, I think you definitely see it when it's not there. But you have to take the luck out of it being there, right? So putting rules in place across everything to make sure that you've defined with clarity and then propagated that clarity throughout everyone within the conversation, within the company, like what this brand is and who it's for. And then what Jenna, having run a really big company, is so brilliant at is making sure that everyone within the company not only understands what these rules are, not only understands what the implications for their remit are in relation to this idea, but also knows how they're being measured against it. And so I think that it is a lot of work to create that level of alignment and make sure everyone is shepherding it through and know what it means for them and how they're going to be evaluated. But if you don't do it to that degree, then you just see the authenticity at the end. But it's only when you haven't brought everyone along at every component to make sure that you're not just telegraphing the value that the company offers from every touch point, but also the values that underpin them. And if people are left to their own devices, especially as company scales, it's very easy to go awry. And we have a very savvy group of consumers and customers these days that even if something's 10 degrees off, you can kind of smell it. So we do really believe in like putting in the work and making sure that everyone's on the bus.
I think in addition to that, what you really see is customers choosing to spend their money, whether it be business to business or direct to consumer business. That involves trust. And I think in absence of trust, in absence of that honesty about what you're producing and everyone, that you can lose your foothold. I think being able to be the brand that people rely on and trust comes from every single touch point really laddering up to what the mission is. So whether it be customer service, supply chain, central procurement, accounting, how your bills get paid, all of those things, they are critical and they make up a good company. And so I think authenticity internally, making sure people feel seen and believed and heard, and they're brought through the process, as Jonny said, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, you called out something important there, which I think sometimes people hear these terms, but they do directly link to outcomes. And especially when you're building up brands, whether it's VC or PE, the measurement, the results matter a lot. And I'm curious, you're both from the creative world. How do you sort of balance this tension, if there is one, between art and commerce, the desire to make something that lasts a long time, that's timeless, with results that you're being expected to help deliver on behalf of your partners? How do those work together, or how do they come into conflict?
There is process to how we think that through. So what we see is like strategically, we all need to be aligned, right? What are we? What is it that only we do? What we then do is make sure that we're prioritizing tasks of what people need to understand or believe about the company, and then connecting those tasks or allocating those tasks to channels in which the right context in which to achieve those objectives. But once you're really, really clear on the what and then the where and the who, you need to then deliver that with creativity and impact in order to be seen and noticed and have your messages like be heard, right? So you need to know where do we not budge, and then where is there fluidity and flexibility and creativity to become part of the process as it comes to life, but still have that filter to be able to evaluate, is this on brand, or is this not? I try and take the luck out of the fame, right? I think that there are some companies that maybe believe in creativity through chaos. We believe in creativity through discipline, right?
Yeah.
And have very, very creative people that have made a lot of creative things at the company. But sometimes in these investor contexts, I never use the word creative.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
So I just talk about the brand and being clear on what it is, and not thinking about this as creative in certain contexts just can add a feeling of like this is an esoteric or an indulgent exercise, where creativity, I do believe, is an imperative, not an indulgence. But how you frame it up and how you serve it up is it's important.
Another thing we talk quite a bit about with any creative company, not so much with like a technology company or somebody making robots, but more where creative really is at the cornerstone of what the brand does, is just decision rights. Because I think while you mentioned tension, it is important and it needs to exist because both sides need to actually really make sure that they have two different sides of their head working together. And you need those two to really push against each other. But at the end of the day, there needs to be a level of decision rights where you're not just spinning out. And I think it's a little bit to like a brother and sister. It's like, listen, these things we have to work together here. If we both want to go someplace, or we both want our parents to agree to something, we have to work together. So how do we actually get the best out of this? And what are the compromises that we're both willing to make in order to get what we want? Because I'm, managing and maintaining this side of the business. And I believe that you're just as important as you. And in that level of respect between the two teams is deeply important, as well as a healthy tension. Like there needs to be that in order for both people to be able to push the other and to do their job and to make sure that you're getting the best results.
I think that's such a good point. We've talked to executives on both sides. CFOs not really understanding marketing. I think there's like an ongoing joke. They're like, oh yeah, they got the Super Bowl ad. I don't know why they did that. And being able to articulate this idea of timeless brands, you have to invest in that over time. You're not going to see those returns like you would in a Facebook ad immediately. Want to quickly flip over to your journeys in personal finance and growing your careers. And I think what's interesting about both of you is you've done a lot of things in different arenas, and I think there's a lot of lessons that come from that. Jenna, I want to start with you and ask you, I'm sure you're hit up with offers all the time, whether it's, hey, endorse this or invest in this. What have you learned over time as this has come in? How has your sort of diligence and decision making evolved? How do you decide where to put your time or capital given the demand that's probably there?
It's usually a connected passion, whether it be some type of product that I'm interested in or believe in. I certainly really love projects that are run by women. I think women are underinvested in, and I think they're incredibly bright and very savvy and tenacious and work very, very hard. Also, something that has some sort of personal connection, I find, is often like, do I use it? Do I want to use it? Is it something I would recommend to somebody else? That to me is a good marker of something where if I can stand behind it and say, like, I really think you should try this. This is an interesting play that feels authentic to me. I wouldn't, and as we think about where the world is going, obviously, who's thinking about AI? Because literally that is going to change the world, as we are seeing literally every single day. And so I think how people are using that to their advantage, I think is going to be a metric that I probably wouldn't have had a year ago, and will be going forward. I think it also depends on your goals. My goals are to invest, not just to build wealth, but to also build a community and to feel like I'm connected to things that are important to me. So it's my mission, or my mantras might be slightly different than someone who, and it doesn't mean I don't want to make money, but I'm just saying it's not my prime motivator.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out with any of this. There's not one playbook. Everyone has different ambitions, different goals, different financial situations. Jonny, if you think about our audience of retail investors, people at various stages of their investing journeys, what, in your experience working with a lot of different brands, whether it's at Blackstone or Droga, at Fundamental, what are some tips you would have for people to feel more confident? So not necessarily, you're not trying to tell people what to do. We don't know what their goals are, but what are some of the ways, even over your career, you became more confident as you were making these types of decisions?
Sure. I just want to disclaimer myself here by telling your audience that I'm not an investment professional,
Yes.
And that I am a brand person.
Yeah.
But I would say I work a lot with investment companies, and my own personal philosophy is to always stay closer into investing in things that you really care and understand the most you can about. So where are you really prepared to go very, very deep and continue to want to learn and deepen your understanding within a certain sector? And how do you create communities around that sector? To Jenna's point, that you're able to share learnings and hypotheses, as well as then plugging in your media diet to be connected to those different sectors. So there are a few things that I really care about, or I find very, very interesting, and those tend to be the areas I am investing around, because I feel, while I'm not an expert, that I know as much as I can around that. And I know that sounds like very Captain Obvious, but that's like my approach.
I think you both touched on something important, which is just curiosity as an investor, a desire to dig deeper and learn and follow your interests. I think that Warren Buffett said that, invest in what you know and explore what you know, and you can start there and identify new avenues from there. But I think even for people who are just getting started,
Yes.
if it's not direct investment advice.
And what are those rabbit holes that you want to go down? Where will you want to put in the time to really understand as much as you can? And if you can connect those two things, it also stops you from doom scrolling, then that seems like a good thing, right?
I know you're both incredibly busy. I have 2 rapid fire questions before we let y'all go. First question, and I'll start with you, Jenna. What's a brand you can't live without?
What's a brand I can't live without? I would have to say Ascot Chang.
Okay.
I get all my shirts made, and it's my
Amazing.
probably one of my favorite things to do.
Jonny, how about you?
This is going to sound really bad, and I'm
Oh,
really regretting
I'm ready.
this.
I'm ready.
Right. So this, but so I want to be thought of as, a creative person in this investment world. And the row really allows me, when you pick your pieces, because it's, costs more money than God, but allows me to feel like I am being formal in a way that I'm not wearing a suit and still able to feel like myself. So there are a couple of key things that are in my wardrobe that I couldn't live without.
I thought you were going to say Outback Steakhouse based on that
The bloomin'
caveat.
onion, that and the
Yeah.
bloomin' onion from Outback Steakhouse, all day.
Those go
Yeah,
together.
they do. I
And
only
if,
eat those in the row. Yeah.
and then final, Jenna, do you have a go-to source for creative or business inspiration, or what's one source that might be not obvious that you get inspired by?
I mean, I think I would say the thing that every time I come back from, I know this is also Captain Obvious, but traveling, I think
Yeah.
it's so easy to get in your own bubble and to see things through the lens that you see on your daily life. And, especially when we're working on brands and even just some of the conversations and the messaging we're talking about, it's like, okay, well, we live in New York. What happens to the person who's living in, Minnesota? Like what's their perspective? And so I think having different perspectives, hearing and meeting people that you would never meet, I think those kinds of things really open up your aperture in terms of what you take in, and then what you reflect back out. So I think like real traveling and meeting people is so invigorating.
Love it. How about you, Jonny?
Just by being around different people, I moved myself and my family right to like the middle of the busiest and craziest block in Manhattan, where there are a million things happening at all hours of the day and night, and I really love that. And I love
Yeah.
being able to walk out and see and feel energy and be taken out of my comfort zone. And so yeah, I think that like living in the thick of it is a key part of helping me always be inspired.
Love
The only
it.
thing I would say is like doing things you don't know how to do. I think a lot of people are so afraid to try. Like it's been the biggest blessing of my life is being able to try new things in this second part of my career. And I think I feel really grateful that I actually took a lot of risks, and it has been very inspiring and a lot has changed in my life. And I think it would not have if I hadn't taken a lot of risks.
Love that. Get out of your comfort zone, Thank you so much, Jenna and Jonny. This was great. Loved hearing your stories, your frameworks, the work you're doing at FundamentalCo, obviously helping shape how we think about investing and storytelling and long-term value. And I know you're both incredibly busy. I really appreciate you both. So for listeners looking to learn more, check out fundamental.co and follow Jenna and Jonny online. Of course, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share Culture and Capital wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.